Okay.
All right. The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the January 8th, 2024 Asheville Noise Advisory Board meeting. My name is Jessica Thomason. I am the chair of the board. I will introduce each agenda item and facilitate the meeting to help our audience follow along. All committee members and staff are participating virtually today. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the Noise Advisory Board page. For those of you that are with us today, thank you. I will now go through and introduce the board members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Board members, as I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Vice Chair Rick Freeman. Rick is frozen. Hate it when that happens.
Yeah, not a good look.
Reb Hazlib.
Present.
Jeff Santiago.
Present.
David Ledger.
Present.
Carmelo Pampalonio. Carmelo is not here. Rick Freeman. You're muted. Oh, he'll be back. Also joining us today, hopefully, is Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
I don't think she's on, and I don't see Todd present either.
Okay, and you'll normally here is Noise Administrator Todd Justice. I'm going to give Rick just a minute to see if we can get him back up and running. Okay. First order of business is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Jeff Santiago makes a motion. Thank you, Jeff. Can I get a second?
Second.
Reb gave a second. Thank you. David, can I get a yay or nay from you for approving the minutes from the last meeting?
Yay.
Thank you. And Rick, can you hear me? Okay, I approve as well. And Rick is having technical difficulties. We'll give him a second, but before we call that motion approved, we'll come back to that, but we'll just move forward in the sense of timing and move on to the staff report. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the staff report? Yes.
I did not this month.
Okay. Well, thank you for your honesty, Rev. I appreciate it. There's nothing out of the ordinary necessarily to report on for the staff report. There is a public input comment that came in that is about excessive vehicle noise. Which is the next thing that we're about to address. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And then there was also a link to the Asheville Citizen Times. Can the noise ordinance stop the sound of gun discharges in Asheville? And I could not access the article without paying for it. So just a heads up if somebody wants to check that out. I know that we did have some discussion about it. Rick had somebody reach out to him about that. And I know that there's something, the same person had reached out to the city and that was getting addressed. So just a heads
I thought the range in question was in the county though.
Oh, was it?
I think so. So I think it would have fallen to the Buncombe County ordinance.
Okay, gotcha.
Rick can correct me if I've got that wrong.
Okay,
I
Well,
did read the article.
okay, gotcha. And I know he'll be back shortly as soon as he can get that figured out. But any other questions on the staff report or questions, comments, concerns so far? No? Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to vehicular noise on old business because Reb and I have had some work from the last meeting to report on. And so I'm going to turn it over to Reb for that.
Okay. In early December, I guess mid-December, Jessica and I had a productive conversation with Lieutenant Mike Clanahan of APD, where we asked what measures could be taken by officers on patrol as part of this overtime saturation into the CBD to identify, even send some cautionary motions to people making noise. And he was pretty forthright that it's not now, probably won't be in the immediate future a priority for them. But if they are instructed into what we're looking for, and we suggested, and he was open to the idea that we would create some, like a one letter, here's the sorts of problems that are being experienced in downtown and the CBD, and the things that are most offensive and obnoxious to the residents and businesses of downtown. And if they could, devise some way to issue cautionary warnings to people that are flagrantly violating the noise ordinance. And he said, yes, we're not going to make it a priority, but we can probably do that if they're read into what we're looking for, the things that are most offensive. That if they're walking down the street and there's a motorcycle, that maybe they would give them, let's knock it off sign. He was very open as well about the fact that, it's unlikely they're going to pull people over, but that with a presence on the street and an awareness of the things that are most flagrant, that they might be able and willing to take some measures. Do you think I summarized that well, Jessica?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think for us, the next steps will be we're going to do our due diligence and talk to downtown residents and business owners and get a list of areas that are most problematic and times, and then give those to Lieutenant Callahan to
distribute to the officers who would then know, the most offensive stuff. On another street noise note, I sent an email this morning to Chad Bandy, who is with the Division of Streets, to ask if they would have a conversation about what it would take to create and erect some signage related to the noise ordinance, friendly signage. I did look at the things that they were doing in Greenville, and they're kind of friendly, just advising people that there's a noise ordinance and that they are subject to fines in the event that they're issued a citation, and up to $1,000, I think, in egregious cases. And he replied back that he was not the individual within the city to talk to. He gave me another name. He copied my email to the other person, Chris somebody, I don't have their name in front of me. And that individual's on vacation. So we've started that conversation, nothing really to report there. But then anecdotally, I was just telling Jessica this earlier. Way back when we were talking about whether or not APD might or could be involved in enforcement of traffic noise downtown, Mike Lamb was really receptive to the idea. He was open, receptive, didn't make any concrete proposals about what could be done, but he's now the interim captain, and has made it no secret that he wants to be the interim chief, and wants to be the chief. I mean, he's actively pursuing the chief's job. So that could bode well for the police department being active within the area of noise enforcement. Well, that's the street noise report.
Any questions on that? Comments? No? Okay. Yeah, so we'll keep plugging away on that and hopefully get a little bit further down the road with that and help to work on that quality of life issue. Okay. Decibel working group research and next steps. Rick, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Thanks. Sorry, I was having network problems. I think I fixed them.
All good.
So we have our results. We have DBC measurements and DBA measurements inside and outside. And I think the question before this group is, how do we interpret the DBC results? And how do we debate amongst ourselves whether that warrants possible ordinance modification in one way or another? And so what would you typically do in this case is a couple things, and this is really open for debate. So I'll just toss my thoughts out and then you guys jump in on it. One, you start searching through city noise ordinances to see how and why other cities have adopted DBC, how they implement it. Is it an actual number that they include? Is it sort of like what we and CAN originally had proposed? If the enforcement officer hears a certain amount of loud bass, then they can make a decision to modify the acceptable DBA, and there's options there. So we need to do, so that's one line of work we can do. And the other line of work we can do is what does science say about the impact of DBC on the stress level of human beings? I had just started to Google that way back before the holidays hit, and my God, there are tons and tons of articles. Most of which I ran into were studies of the impact of DBC in sort of either work or classroom settings. So indoor DBC and how it affected people's ability to concentrate and how it affected their abilities to do their jobs. You can imagine that being the kind of thing that corporations that have factories and such would sponsor research to try to figure out what the heck they needed to do. But there was lots and lots of articles, and some of the science was over my head without doing more looking and research. And what I'm thinking there is just finding information from reputable research sources that would let us make a strong argument one way or the other about what we've learned, the impact of DBC, and whether we should do additional measurements or whatever, because we're concerned that that's actually causing stress, which ultimately leads to a host of diseases for human beings. So Jessica and I discussed this, and we thought we should open this discussion with the people who are here and try to get people to sign up to do some work with a initial deadline of the next meeting so we can see where we are. So with that, I'll stop talking and open it to discussion and debate. Yes, it does mean that people would have to do homework. Jeff.
Hey, yeah, I started actually doing some stuff where I'm looking through some other city ordinances because I have been interested in how some might take the approach with DBC. And I know Carmelo mentioned a few things about the idea of combining DBA and DBC readings to get something that might be a bit more accurate. So I'm yet to find anyone that's doing that. but that's something I will continue to look for. So I'm happy to take on looking at some comparative ordinances around and seeing who might be using DBA versus DVC, or if we can find anyone who might be actually using a combination of both.
Okay, great. And,
It's a very small, I'm sorry, Rick, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I tried to do some searches, and this kind of stuff is buried deep in some ordinance file under some hunk
Right.
of software that runs the ordinance stuff for cities. So it takes work. Jeff, as you find them, pump out an email to everybody here, so that we aren't all getting excited because we've already found the safe stuff that you have.
Okay. I started making a little spreadsheet for myself. So once I feel like there's something worth sharing, I'll actually share it with everybody. But you're absolutely right. It's a lot of stuff is buried in code. And then you have, different areas of the city that have different, levels and restrictions. So it's a little complicated to pull all of that out of some of those ordinances. But I'll keep looking.
So I'll come to you next, Reb. One of the things that we learned back in 2018 when we started working on this is to look at the date that the ordinance was written and revised. A lot of these ordinances were written in the early 70s and have not been revised as a result of any science of any kind along the way. So just beware as you hunt around that 70s thinking and 2024 thinking is probably a little bit out of line with each other based on how the population thinks and all that sort of stuff. So the degree we find more modern things one way or the other, I think that will be more credible data as we debate what to do. Mr. Rabb.
I was just going to add that the vast majority of major metropolitan areas around the country rely on DBA. I think it's like 3%. That's a statistic that's buried in a clearinghouse document. I think I sent you that, Rick. And Carmelo, I think I said I'd send you that, and I don't think I did. I didn't, but I will. Most use DBA. And I just wanted to put that out there. You can deal with DBC by modifying DBA. It's just a different spectrum. You just, and I don't really understand what it means to combine DBA and DBC. I mean, it's DBC is it's a bigger filter. It's just allowing more sound in to be measured at a lower frequency. So I'm not sure what the science of combination is. But I'm of the opinion that we just need to open a review of why we set sound level limits where we did to begin with. Most of the noises, in fact, probably 99% of the noise complaints in the city do not reach the minimum sound level. They don't reach 65 dBA. So what does that tell you? Is that people, if we're still getting 2,000 complaints a year, there's only 100 complaints less this year than there were last year or the previous and 2 years. The complaints are still there. So the 65 decibels doesn't change anything. If you want to change something, you've got to review your decibel levels, your sound level limits, so that there's an impact, so that it actually, you can reduce noise by enforcing some standards that do that. Ours, frankly, don't. The levels that we set were originally arbitrary, based on a sound spatial model created by a consultant in sound who resides in Asheville, and that created an ambient that's an untested ambient. So I mean, to your point, Rick, I think we should open the whole can of worms and look at it all.
David, Carmelo, thoughts?
Reb just mentioned about DBA. It's kind of universal in all the specs, the standards, and it's widely used, widely known. But DBC is, just a different filter. Yeah, I think there's some specs out of Europe. I wasn't able to find anything out of the US that got into details about DBC. I think there's one, I was trying to find this one paper. I think it's some consultant. He published something last year about DBC. That was the first one I've seen about that, and in the US, but I think in Europe it's a little more common. So I'll try to find those papers and share them with the working group.
Camillo?
Yeah, I'm just kind of chiming in. I got caught up in work. I'm sorry I'm late. I lost track of time. But yeah, I guess jumping in, it seems we're discussing, I guess in Reb's words, opening up the biggest can of worms for the decibel system and just completely putting everything on the table and reviewing everything.
Down level limits.
The limits, right. But in that, as part of that conversation, reassessing our, understanding of the different weighting scales of decibels, like A versus C and everything like that.
So before you came on, I suggested, Reb has suggested broadening the work, which I think we should ultimately discuss, or
Uh-oh. Technical issues not resolved.
Carmelo, basically what we were talking about was, taking the findings of the decibel level working group so far, and then just doing some more research, both on what other cities are doing, with that are, as we know, like Reb said, most cities use DBA. There are some that use DBC, and sort of just doing more research in terms of those that are doing a combination of both and what that looks like. And also when that's been implemented, like if that's something from the back in the 70s that's been around, or something that's been updated. And then the other part of it is just about the health effects of DBC levels, right? What that does. So those were the things that we were talking about, and just looking for people who wanted to be involved in helping to do that research moving forward.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much what we were kind of ending on at our last meeting, where we were basically all in agreement that the more information that we have on the table, the better. And Reb, you've done a great job pointing out that there is a plethora of information that we can gather from other cities and everything. Some of it may not be relevant, some of it may be outdated, and that's great. But yeah, no, I agree. Putting all that information in front of us and digesting it, as much as possible within reason. I think that totally makes sense. I think that we can do that hopefully in a timely manner, so it doesn't, interfere with other things. But the important part is that if we do this right and we really inform ourselves well with this, and we can come back and reassess everything, potentially the limits, the way that we look at the weighting scales and everything, that will have incredibly huge, reach and impact. So yeah, it's a big endeavor, but I think it makes sense, and we should pursue it. Yeah.
Reb, you have your hand up.
I do. I can't urge each of you enough to read the guidelines for community noise written by the World Health Organization. It is the treatise on the world of noise within communities. It is a baseline for understanding both the severity of the health problem, measurement. Everything that we're talking about now is contained within that document.
which I
You
think I
guys hear me?
distributed previously.
You
This
you
is Rick
have,
on the phone. Can you hear me?
yeah.
So the only thing, I love that you guys are carrying on the conversation. And since I can't read body language or anything, I'm not really sure where we are. I just want to make sure that what I recall from the battle to get any noise ordinance written in this town. Reb made a comment maybe after Carmelo joined, but I just want to reinforce it. The city staff responsible for coming up with a recommendation for decibel limits used the consultant that Reb talked about, and that consultant, correct me if I'm wrong, Reb, I can't see you raise your hand, so you just have to interrupt me, had been doing a bunch of research in national parks and forests about ambient sound levels and that sort of thing, and they asked him to, if he could apply that model to a city. And they believed he said yes. And our understanding was he came back with a model that had a knob. And you could set that knob in any of 3 positions. And he left it up to city staff to decide which position to set the knob in. And they set it in such a way that it implied that ambient sound levels throughout the entire area that the noise ordinance impacts were very high. So when we're just talking DBA, there was no DBC part of that I'm aware of. So if you believe that's the right setting, which we never did, and you have DBA ambient at 55 everywhere you go, well, then you have a hard time arguing to set a DBA ordinance level at 55, because you'd just be competing with the ambient level and it would just be chaos. And we tried to debate that and ultimately failed. And ultimately the ordinance numbers that came out, for those of you who weren't there in the city council meeting when the decisions were made, were a compromise presentation by staff that was somewhere in between what CAN was asking for and what Councilwoman Roney was asking for, which was a 75 dBA limits everywhere. So if we're going to open it up, we're going to have to go after all this stuff. I just want everyone to be aware that nobody really knows what the ambient is. And actually, we've done good work. Not hundreds of data points, not it's every square meter of the town, but we've done really good work establishing some understanding of what ambient sounds like. And that may lead us down a path that would debunk or reinforce those early assumptions about just how noisy it is in my neighborhood and your neighborhood and Reb's neighborhood. I can tell you, without ever having borrowed a properly calibrated meter, that anytime I sit on my back deck and I don't have my own music turned on, the ambient dBA as measured by the ordinance is usually between 39 and 43. So at least in my little corner of the world, which is less than a mile from downtown, but has Bocatcher Mountain between me and downtown noise, assuming that 50 plus or 55 decibels of ambient is incorrect. So those are some of the challenges we'd have to get over with city staff as they defend the position that they took 2 years ago. I'm done.
I might add some color to that. The study that the city had done was performed by a guy named Dr. Bruce Eichelheimer, who's a reputed noiseologist, for lack of a better expression, who has been in the business for a number of years. What he used was a geospatial model developed by the National Park Service that essentially creates a matrix of typical noise productions based on zoning classifications and particular uses within specific areas of a city. So you sort of overlay this model on top of the zoning of a city, and it tells you within a national average what anticipated ambient sound will be. And that's what the city used. The dial that Rick referred to, and I'll leave you all to study this on your own, but it's called the LN ratio, capital L, little n, and expressed as L10, L50, L90. It's basically, Carmelo, the same as A or C decibels. It's the size of the band that you're looking at. And the L10, the L50, and the L90 they have historically been applied to ambient noise in studying what's acceptable within certain given urban environments. The city elected to use the I think the L90, it's either the L10 or the L90, to determine an ambient level that would automatically set it beyond, which is customarily used to determine ambient noise in urban environments. That's what Rick is referring to. And I invite you to study that L10, 50, and 90. It's interesting. But it gave rise through a negotiated process. I mean, that document, the work that he did, plus just the sort of negotiative nature of arriving at a sound level limit based on what Councilwoman Roney wanted versus what Can wanted, those three resulted in a number that frankly was plucked out of thin air. And so that's why I've always advocated for a much more grounded level of research, such as what Rick just talked about. I mean, that study, if it did anything, showed you what actual ambient levels are. So that's a little color for Rick, what Rick was talking about.
So do we have people that have agreed to move forward with helping to further this research and next steps?
So I heard Jeff say he would.
Jeff's got his hand up. Yeah.
And I heard David say that he would continue to look for some papers. I didn't hear anything yet from anybody else that's still on the call.
Jeff, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I said I would continue to dive into ordinances around to check for any use of DBC versus DBA.
Okay, great. Reb, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Jeff answered it. I was just going to ask what we're looking for.
Okay.
I agree.
I mean,
sorry, Reb. I didn't realize you were.
Oh, go ahead, Carmela.
I'm here to help with this as well. Regardless of what the specific tasks, entail, I am happy to jump in wherever, if that involves looking at what other cities are doing and kind of have like a cross-board comparative analysis of other cities and other ordinances, or more of a deep dive into like just the weighting systems or measuring systems themselves. I'm happy to jump in here. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else on decibel level working group research and next steps? No? Okay.
With Reb's help, maybe I could reach out to the guy who did this work and, help the city set this artificially high, or maybe whatever you would want to think about it. And maybe we could convince him to come and talk to us at a retreat. That way it wouldn't be my memory or Reb's memory. It would be the actual author, and the only thing we have to figure out is if he is still under contract with the city or the county on anything related to this, and whether that would put him in an awkward position to recall what actually happened back in 19 and 20 and 21. But he's an expert, so I would think that all of it would benefit from, if we showed him what we measured compared to where things are. I think that would be a fairly interesting piece of the puzzle.
Reb?
I would request from the city a copy of his study.
That's what I was going to say too, because what I remember from those conversations with early on in 2018, like Rick's talking about, is that part of the reason for their reluctance to making ambient levels in residential areas, for instance, is that they were so wildly and vastly different. So I think it would be interesting if we had that data to take a look at as well. So I'm on that same page with you for sure.
How do we do that? Actually, how do we do that?
Jessica, if you want to email me the information that you guys are trying to obtain, and I can get with Todd, or email me and copy Todd on it.
Okay.
We can see who we can put you in touch with.
Okay. And I think, probably Daniel will be a good resource for that as well, because he's been there from the start. And that was, I remember just early, not from the start necessarily, but from getting that information with him and Gagne. I remember having those conversations. So I'll send you an email on that.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you. I need to go circle back now that Carmelo is here and Rick are here to getting approval of the minutes from you two. So Rick, if I could get a yay or nay for the approval of the minutes from the December meeting from you.
Yay.
Okay. And Carmelo.
Yay.
Okay. So motion is, minutes are approved for the December meeting. Thank you all. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Annual report discussion. So it's linked in your agenda. So it's time for our annual report that goes to City Council. If you want to take a look at it, there's a summary statement. First of all, let me just ask, has everyone had a chance to take a look at this yet? Yes. I got that little eek look from Reb. All good. Okay. So basically this is just looking at, it's got the mission statement on there. It's got our summary statement. I put the things that we had been working on in terms of, that were the areas of focus, which were the decibel levels, vehicle noise, resolving challenges with waste haulers. I did put something in there in terms of the fact of the challenge, that this has been challenging at times, knowing that, of course, the city has much more higher priority things that they're dealing with, and that we know that, noise hasn't been at the top of the list, and we understand that, but also just recognizing, acknowledging that it's been a challenging thing for us, right? I focus on some of our accomplishments that we've had. There's a link to the decibel level working group. And then this is where we have recommendations for City Council. Right now, the only one that we have is wanting to continue to move forward to get a bigger assessment of what's happening, of how people feel about where the noise ordinance, how effective it's been, right? So one of the things is it was the biggest, we know that when it came to the original study or initial outreach to the city, to the community about the where noise was at and that sort of thing, it had a lot of participation, a lot of engagement from the community. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to assess this, right? Because again, for us, it's about data and getting more information from the community, more data points as to how people feel the noise ordinance changes are going. So Councilwoman Mosley, who's on the call now, my plan is to reach out to city staff again and CC you on that to see if we can continue to move that forward. But as of right now, that's really the only recommendation we have, unless anybody wants to add something else to that.
Sounds good. Send it over to me.
Okay, thank you. And then I have upcoming goals for us as a group, which is continue to work with downtown businesses and residents to figure out the most problematic areas for vehicular noise, and work with law enforcement to address, gather additional community input, gather for effectiveness of the noise ordinance, and gather additional research and data on DBC levels used in other noise ordinances and the stress impact on health on higher DBC. So that's pretty much what I have there. Any questions, comments?
We'll be looking at additional research on DBA as well, but I mean, I think it's all the same.
Yeah.
The way you have written, but yeah, everything looks good.
Which I'm fine to add that to it, right? Too, might as well add that. Now I will say that there's an amendment request that Daniel Oropesa has sent to Rick and I that did not make the agenda, just in terms of the timing of when we received it. And it has to do in regards to construction definition, which is to include maintenance to one of the definitions. I'm going to actually highlight this and put this in the chat for folks to take a look at. And the reason why I'm doing that now is just because we received it and it was something that had been brought up. And basically the main issue is that one of the things that they're getting a number of complaints about is the pressure washing complaints, right? So what's happening is people are deciding to pressure wash buildings downtown at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m, right? And so basically, as this becomes popular in the spring, this is something that we need to look about, is adding the word maintenance to the definition of construction. So if you can take a look at the chat, it'll show you that it currently doesn't have maintenance in it. And that's what Daniel's request is, to have that included to it. Then I believe it makes it not a nuisance. I have to get some clarification on that. Yeah, jackhammers, construction equipment, and vehicles are allowed and therefore luckily subject to day times, not a decibel standard. Since landscaping is a definition of construction, I respond to leaf blowers and lawnmower complaints under that section of the code without incident. I am requesting we do the same for pressure washing to fall under maintenance in construction. Otherwise, we are setting up pressure washing companies for failure under the decibel standard. So that's why. Any thoughts on that?
Makes sense to me.
It's moving, I mean, it's specifically related to pressure washing, or that, and it's moving pressure washing under construction because it broadens the amount of time and raises the sound level limits. Is that what I understand?
Correct. Yeah. So for instance, like the jackhammering that's been happening outside my window all morning,
right,
is not subject to a decibel level. It's subject to time of day. And so that's what it would do for pressure washing, right? Because pressure washing is loud, like leaf blowers and lawnmowers, for instance. And so they're not necessarily under, that's considered maintenance. And so they fall under time of day versus having to meet a decibel level, right? So right now, if somebody was to pressure wash, it'd be subject to, they just want it so it's like, hey, these are the times that you can pressure wash. It falls under this from the 7 a.m. to, I think it's 7 p.m. is the construction times. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think is what Daniel has told me is when they can do construction noise. Otherwise, they usually have to get an after hours permit that allows them to do it outside of those allowed times.
Okay. So yeah, so this has been an issue for city staff, right, to deal with.
This is Rick. What is the problem that he wants to solve? Is he trying to solve it to make it a violation so that when he responds to these complaints from people, that he actually has the authority to make a violation? Or is he trying to broaden it so it won't be a violation?
He's not trying to broaden it. So basically what he's doing is that the problem he's having is that these pressure washing things are happening roughly between midnight and 5 a.m.
So that would then be under the nuisance standard, since they're not. I'm sorry. I just when I saw the word maintenance go in to the construction definition, I mean, that what this sounds like is the use of power washers doesn't have anything to do with new construction. So it didn't.
Well, construction isn't just new construction. It's like erection, repair, assembly, alteration, landscaping. It's all of that. Like, so for instance, like landscaping falls under construction, right? So when somebody's blowing leaves or doing construction or blowing leaves or mowing lawn or running a weed eater, for instance, like that's sort of just all of these maintenance companies, all these landscaping companies know that they have between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to do that. Part of the problem is that right now it's making it just a decibel level standard and not a noise disturbance standard as in residential zones. So this is part of like, if City of Asheville adds the word maintenance to construction definition, we can enforce the ordinance under the allowable construction days, times, Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After hours permit for pressure washing would still have to fall under an existing building permit. So the thing is I think part of what he's saying is that like the way it is now, if somebody complains about pressure washing, it's always going to be over that 62 dBA for the ordinance, which is also
but the nuisance standard is a decibel related. The nuisance standard is this a nuisance to somebody trying to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning?
right.
Yes or no? And that's in the judgment of the enforcement. So are we issuing citations to the people who are doing this at 4 o'clock in the morning?
As far as I know, that's the case. We
should just have him or Todd attend one of these meetings so that we're not trying to guess. That would be my recommendation. Because we'll have to go all the way through to city council to get an ordinance change. And we don't actually have any enforcement person present in this meeting who should be answering the questions instead of you trying to interpret for them.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can ask Todd to be, make sure he's here at the next meeting or have Daniel come, because part of it is I know that there's just no, pressure washing is not addressed at this time in the noise ordinance. So it just falls under the decibel levels. But I just wanted to bring that up because we got this email and it's because of the annual report is due on the 19th, I think. So, but yeah, I think what we may just have to make a recommendation after the fact so we can have them come and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
But pressure washing after midnight, that's a thing.
It's a thing, right? Well, and that's the thing.
So weird.
Well, and that's why that's why city staff is asking for us to get involved and see if we can't make a recommendation, right? Because it is an issue that they are seeing. Like there
How
was
strange.
12 complaints in 2022 and 9 complaints in 2023. So I guess some people just decide to pressure wash at 3 a.m.
I guess. Yeah.
It
It occurred to me.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, same here, right? Like, who would have thought that that's a thing where people do that, but people do.
You got to squeeze the best out of your rental equipment, I guess, huh?
There you go.
We all know what that's like. Yeah.
This, if I'm reading it right, basically, what Daniel is suggesting, this was from Daniel, right?
This is from Daniel. Yeah.
Is that like, well, first, it's hard for me to imagine some sort of ordinance that treats pressure washing drastically different than, say, like a riding lawnmower, right? Like,
right.
Both of them, why would you need to be doing it late at night or in those early hours of the morning anyways? But also, like, that's a fairly, relatively standard neighborhood maintenance, whatever activity that you will see. I mean, I have a pressure washer. I'm not doing it at 3 a.m. I promise it's not me. I have one, but like it is loud. It's got the motor, but so is a riding mower. And it's hard for me to imagine those being treated drastically different when Monday I gotta get some of the, muck off the side of my house or my driveway or whatever. And then Tuesday I gotta go ride my mower, but I can only get slapped with one particular ordinance violation and they're both going to be different types of violations. That just seems a little odd. So if I'm reading it right, I understand what Daniel is getting at, and it makes sense, and it does seem to make it so there's a more specific clause that says you can't be doing that at 3 a.m. with that, but that's if I'm reading everything correctly. I think I follow.
Yeah, it's essentially that. And the other part of that is that if you were riding your lawnmower and I came up to you and said it's too loud, and they took a decibel reading and it was at 85 or 90 decibels, that they could write you that's the thing, is like, it's meant to be like, these are things that are common that will happen between this time and this time, especially for this, which is the central business district specifically, right? That's been the concern. So, but what we'll do is, I just wanted to bring it up, right? We didn't get a chance to get it on the agenda, and then I'll follow up with Daniel and Todd and see about maybe, actually, one of the things that would be great, which leads into the next conversation, is if we can find time to do a board retreat, then have them come and talk to us about it then when we're all in the same room. So would be ideal. So with that, on to retreat discussion. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts and availability, let's say between January 15th and February 15th, for instance, in those 30 days of what availability people have to meet for board retreat, which I believe we did correct me if I'm wrong, those of you that were there, was we did a 4-hour meeting. Yeah, something like that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
There.
So one, are you all interested in game to do that?
When?
Sometime between, I can set out a doodle for schedule wise sometime between January 15th and I'm going to say probably the first 2 weeks of February, sometime in there.
Sure.
Great. I'll put it in the doodle, but I'll say from the outset that the sooner the better for me personally. But again, I'll put it in the doodle.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay.
I definitely want to do it. And I'm largely available in the first 2 weeks of February. I'm not here 1 week at the end of this month.
Same. That's why I didn't say that. At first I was like between this time and this time, but like I leave on Friday and come back on Monday, and then I'm gone again at the last week of the month. So it makes my schedule a little hard.
Yeah, I'll respond to a doodle. I mean, I'm in town. I have schedules, but I'm in town, so I'll make it work.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions on that before we move to public comment? No? Okay. Ashley?
We do not have anybody on public comment today.
Okay, thank you. And I will just reiterate that we did have one comment that was, again, about vehicular noise. And so just to make sure that we're acknowledging that. And we'll move forward with reaching out to that person and just, again, part of our research for figuring out when times and places that are most problematic. Okay, any other questions or comments before I ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting? No? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move.
Reb moves. Carmelo has a second.
Second.
Jeff,
Aye.
Rick,
I
and I as well. Okay, well, thank you all for your time today. And our next meeting, I believe, is on February 12th. So I will see you all then. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
thank you.